recognizing safety. This is actually, this was part of my Building Safety Anchors course, and I took it out just because it was too much. This is really about recognizing safety. This may be a brand new concept if you have no idea what I'm talking about as far as polyvagal theory. My podcast, Stuck Not Broken, has episodes 101 through 109, which are a very, very, very deep dive into the polyvagal theory. I highly recommend you give those a listen, Stuck Not Broken. I also have my Polyvagal 101 course on justinlmft.com. But basically, when I talk about safety, I'm not talking about are you actually safe in your environment. I'm talking about are the biological pathways for safety activated, and those are the ventral vagal pathways. That's not super important, but what is important is that when I talk about safety, I'm talking about the biology of safety, okay? Not just are you literally safe, but are those pathways active? And the way you can tell that is you'll feel safe, but you'll also have some other experiences that I'm going to go into that you could recognize. So if you're brand new to the polyvagal theory, you're brand new to this whole like safety thing and how it relates to mental health, that's really what I'm talking about is are your biological pathways active for safety? And then are you able to socially connect with other people, and are you able to exist in the present moment and stay in your body? Basically, that's kind of the basic idea when I'm talking about safety. So that's all well and good, right? But what does it actually feel like? How can you actually identify it when you do get there? And especially if this is something new for you, like I work with teens, mostly teens. I have adult clients on the weekend and in the evenings as well. But I work with teens a lot who live in homes that completely lack co-regulation, that completely lack support, and are downright not helpful. I'll just put it that way. And so their ability to understand what I'm talking about, like if I talk about safety, like it just doesn't make sense. So I'll use other words, but yeah, their capacity to recognize safety and to feel it is significantly diminished. And that might be true for you as well, where maybe you did live a lifetime worth of a lack of safety, a lack of co-regulation. And so now, even decades later, when I talk about this stuff, you're like, what? What are you talking about? That could be very, very much true. So we got to talk about what it feels like when it does happen. So there might be the easiest way, maybe, is to look at this as two bodily sensations, two potentials, okay? And even this could still absolutely be a challenge, but that's what I'm offering up right now is maybe we could just look at it in two different ways, okay? And that would be, do you feel pulled towards something or pushed away from something? By the way, I'm looking at my notes over here. That's why I keep looking off to the side. Plus, I have another screen up for my open office hour. So that might be the easiest way, maybe, is do you feel pushed away from something or pulled towards something? And so maybe just a quick exercise here. Remember, think back to a time when you were, oh, by the way, this is not therapy, okay? Think back to a time when you felt like you truly wanted to be around somebody. This is like someone you were truly excited to see, someone that you smiled when you saw them. You smiled. You didn't like think about it. You didn't choose to. You just instantaneously smiled. Maybe you want to get closer to them. Maybe you want to give them a hug. Maybe you want to give them a kiss. Maybe you want to give them a handshake. Whatever it is, someone that you felt truly close to. Now, in that moment, as you recall that, in that moment, just reflect on that experience and let yourself, if you can, let yourself feel what it felt like in that moment when you truly felt like you wanted to be with that person. If you need to close your eyes, go right ahead. Now, what did your body feel an impulse to do in that moment? With that person that you genuinely wanted to be around, did you feel this impulse to get closer to them? Did you feel an impulse to hug them or kiss them or shake their hand, whatever it is? And I don't mean like you're doing these things because you have to. I'm saying that you do these things because you felt a genuine impulse to do them. So let yourself feel that if you can. And did you smile? When you saw this person, did you smile? Did you make eye contact with them? Were you able to hold it? In your body, did you feel more of a pull towards them, or did you feel more of a push away from them? Get up and move closer, definitely. Yeah. So you felt this pull towards them, right? That could be what safety feels like. I would say that is what safety feels like, but it's not. There is more to it. But that is an impulse of safety. It's an impulse to connect. That would mean that those ventral vagal pathways are activated and your capacity to socially engage has gone up, and you feel this impulse to go connect with that individual. So that's really the heart of what we're doing here, is that we're remembering a time, and even right now, if you can think about it, you may actually be able to feel it again. Those safety pathways coming alive, but you feel it as this pull towards. You feel this as a pull towards somebody else potentially, when it's truly a feeling like that. So pushes and pulls, they feel different. They have much different felt experiences. When you feel this push away from, for at least for me, it's this like weighed down kind of feeling. There's more weight to it. I literally feel like an impulse to like want to back up, versus safety, where you might feel more bouncy, more airy, more light. And I know these sensation words might be new, but the basic idea here is that we don't just feel our feelings or emotions. Our feelings and our emotions have felt experiences in our body. So these are words that can be used to describe what's happening in our bodies, okay? Feeling this push away might feel like overwhelm, and so you feel this push away from something. It might feel like insecurity, maybe. Pull towards could feel like clarity. It could feel like confidence, maybe. For me in particular, when I feel this push away, or when something doesn't feel safe, I feel this sort of like grating, like the image in my mind is like cheese through a grater. Is that what it's called? And it feels like friction, and so that's an indication to me that I probably should avoid whatever it is, whatever that is. That's just one example. But also for me, I feel the sensation of like cleanliness or smoothness when my safety state's active. I was working with a coach, and when that became active, she would say, "Do you feel this?" Or I would describe like, it sounds weird, but I feel this sensation of cleanliness or like smoothness. And she goes, "Yeah, that's where we want to go. That is that safety state being active." So it sounds odd to use these words, and it's not how we typically talk at all. But if you were able to look inward and notice what it feels like to be safe, or to feel more flight, fight, shut down, whatever it is, there are these experiences that come along with it. And among all these experiences, there is like a basic push or pull that could be an indication of more safety or more danger of that state being active, at least. So in essence, when I say push and pull, these basic little impulses are connected to very, very, very primitive instincts of approach or avoidance. When there's something that is safe or not dangerous, basically, mammals in particular, we'd feel these sensations to go towards whatever it is. When we're around other safe mammals, we would go towards them, and that would help to build a community, tribe, and that was extremely necessary, at least for the little mammals. Actually, still now, I'd say, who are living in a world dominated by reptiles, to feel this connection with other mammals to kind of create our tribes and our communities, to build families and whatnot. But this goes even beyond that. I mean, just avoidance and approach and avoidance is extremely kind of like an essential piece of living organisms. Actually, not even just living. I guess plants also kind of not approach, but they face towards sun, which is necessary, right? Maybe you could even extend it that far. I don't know. So this approach and avoidance would be extremely important, obviously essential for when it comes to mating, staying in families. Like, you kind of have to be able to approach people, right, to stay close to them, but you also have to approach people in order to mate and to create other little people or other little mammals. So you might if you could listen to your tiny little impulses of push and pull, and that could give you a deeper understanding of what is safe for you in particular. This is different than being pulled, kind of quote unquote pulled, towards something that has been like a maladaptive coping mechanism. Someone had put in the chat, they don't trust their impulses, and this probably has a lot to do with that general idea that maybe we feel this pull toward junk food, maybe we feel a pull toward alcohol, or whatever it is that you do to kind of cope with your stuck defensive energy. So you may feel a pull towards that, but the pull that I'm talking about with safety is different than that. So in polyvagal terms, the pull toward a maladaptive coping mechanism, that's called a behavioral adaptation. That is there to help you deal with, or that's something that you do to deal with stuck defensive state, to feel or to deal with, as best you can, maybe stuck flight, fight, shut down, or freeze energy. When that gets too much, then we do these coping skills or these behavioral adaptations as a way to kind of feel relief. It doesn't really relieve, doesn't really solve the problem, but it may be good enough for that person to get through that moment, maybe. So that's the pull that I'm talking about is different than that. There's also just like all of us do it, that mindless like thumb swiping when you're on your phone. You just feel this like pull to do it in a way. It's more of a compulsion though. I wouldn't call it a pull in the sense that I'm talking about with safety. It's more of this like compulsion, like we have to do it. And that really comes from more of a defensive state and not a safety state. That comes from the inability to actually feel your defensive state, be with it, and let it kind of discharge and do its thing. So instead of being with it, what we end up doing are these compulsions, not pulls, but compulsions. Kind of like that differentiation that works for me. So that may come from that flight fight energy attempting to discharge, or it may come from that flight fight energy returning. So maybe it's stuck there and it's trying to come out, or maybe you're in more of a shutdown state and that flight fight energy is now coming up within you and it may be too much. And then we turn to these compulsions or these behavioral adaptations in order to get some kind of relief. Okay, so basically the idea here on a much deeper polyvagal level is your vagal brake, which is your distress tolerance, can't handle the intensity of that flight fight energy surfacing. And so it turns to these coping skills. But the difference here, another way to tell a difference is when we do these behavioral adaptations, it's different than a pull towards safety. When you feel a pull towards safety, it may be a sensation like for me, that smoothness, that cleanliness, that kind of just that feel that I have. But when you feel this compulsion toward these behavioral adaptations or these coping mechanisms, you're not going to have that same feeling. You actually may have guilt, shame, regret, judgment, despair, numbness, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's maybe a really good indicator, although that's like more after the fact. When you feel a pull towards safety, those feelings don't typically come along with it. They may surface as you feel safe. That's a little bit different though. But they may surface because they're kind of stuck within you, and now the body's like, oh, now it's time to feel these more difficult things. But what I'm talking about when we engage in these behavioral adaptations, along with that come all these really deep and difficult feelings. And so that's how it could be a way to tell a difference between a behavioral adaptation, a compulsion, and an actual pull towards safety. So I would really, I would encourage you to pay attention to the sensations that pull you toward safety. Things that are actually safe will feel kind of similar to what I laid out here so far. I can't tell you exactly what it'll feel like for you, but that's kind of the general idea. It will not be this compulsion. It won't be this, I don't think, this overwhelming feeling. It may be different. It may be new. It might be difficult to feel things like trust or vulnerability or connection. Sure. But that's not, that's different. So as you feel these pulls towards safety, you could actually feel those more vulnerable kind of feelings. But that's different than feeling this compulsion toward a behavioral adaptation. And then along with that comes judgment and guilt and shame and all that stuff. When you feel this pull towards safety, I find it's like a slower thing. It's not as like rushed. It's not as frantic. It's a slower felt experience. It's more deliberate. There's more mindfulness. There's this cleaner kind of feeling that comes along with it. When I feel a pull towards safety, I feel this sensation of being in the present moment, of being in my body. That's a heck of a lot different than feeling this compulsion toward doing something to relieve whatever's happening inside of you. There could be a sense of mindful curiosity. So mindfulness is that ability to be in the present moment. Curiosity, I find to be part of these pulls towards safety, is that we're curious about what it feels like to do whatever it is. We're curious about the experience of engaging in that, activity, whatever, or that using that sensory exercise, whatever it is. So during these pulls to safety, you will feel your senses being more active. You'll be more aware. Maybe not more active. You're more aware of what your sensors are telling you. All right. So here's some indications of being in the safety state. Hopefully, it all makes sense, at least enough. But some potentially easy ways. I'll say easy, but it might not be easy, and I respect that. But some potential ways to tell if you're in the safety state or not. Number one, you'll feel safe. I mean, that's kind of obvious and ridiculous, but you'll feel safe. You will feel in your body. You'll feel more present. You'll feel more aware. You'll have more experiential awareness of what's happening in your senses. You'll have, and this might be the biggest one, at least that I notice, especially someone who's super like introverted, we'll call it, or has a home away from home shutdown, there is this impulse to connect with others. And that is something that I definitely notice is like, oh, I'm kind of okay with talking to people right now. Or when I get to work in the morning, I'm actually kind of okay with saying hello and greeting people. And like, that's different. So that might be for me, that's the biggest indication, is that I can actually have this impulse to connect and smile and like talk to people and have more vocal prosody and whatnot. So that's my experience. That's, for me, that's like a clear way of noticing, but also that noticing those sensory experiences really, that when I'm in my safety state, that I notice what things smell like, what things taste like on a much deeper level, and I'm more curious. Another indication, number 2, of being in your safety state is that you'll be able to smile. You'll probably feel an impulse to smile. And when you're not in your safety state, you simply cannot do that, or at least it won't be genuine. If you're in more of a flight fight, like worked up, anxious, aggressive, irritable, depressed, shutdown kind of state, maybe, or depression and shutdown are different than flight fight. Sorry to jumble those. But if you're in more of a defensive state, you kind of lack the ability to smile. For the most part, you lack the ability to smile. And if you do, it doesn't feel genuine. It'll feel forced. And maybe you can smile, but your upper eye area, your upper cheeks, they won't move along with your fake smile. So if you're in a safety state, that's a really good way to tell, is that you can smile. I mean, like right now, I don't know what your capacity is to smile, but try it out and see if it feels genuine or not. I know for me, when I do these presentations or talks, I get a little bit more worked up. I'm more of a flight energy. I do feel safe enough. I can connect. I can think critically for the most part. But I also notice that I have more energy in my system. So my capacity to just like slow down is way less. And my capacity to smile, it's there. I can do it. But it's definitely different than if I was just hanging out at home, relaxing with a friend or my family or whatever. And that kind of smile's different. So I don't know, just check in with yourself. What's your capacity to smile? Does it feel genuine or no? If no, then you probably might be in more of a defensive state. Not that you're actually running away or fighting, but just like that energy is kind of present there. Think about the last time that you were upset at somebody. Maybe kids, a spouse, a loved one, your boss, coworker, whoever it is. So think about that last time, and then ask yourself, in that moment where you were in that very irritable, anxious, aggressive, whatever it is, were you able to smile? Could you smile then? The last time you got in an argument with someone, could you have stopped and smiled? Probably not, because you were not in your safety state enough to be able to do so. All right, number 3, this is the last one I have, and then I'm going to talk about how safety can actually be uncomfortable. Number 3, breathing becomes easier when you're in the safety state. This could be a really good way of identifying whether or not you're in your safety state. Breathing becomes easier. I do see a couple of questions. I'll get to those. I'm going to get through the main stuff, and I'll get to the questions as well. So number 3, breathing becomes easier in the safety state. You'll be able to take deeper breaths into your belly. When we're in more of a defensive state, our breath tends to go in our chest, or I say into our shoulders. It doesn't actually go in your shoulders, but when you're tense, like the chest comes out and shoulders go up. Like all this stuff moves when you're in a more defensive flight fight kind of state. When you're in your safety state, when those pathways are active, you can breathe calmer into your belly, and this area up here doesn't really do a whole lot. So I would invite you right now, take a deep breath and see where it goes. Just kind of be curious about where your breath wants to go, where it naturally goes. Notice if your shoulders are moving up. Notice if your chest comes out, or notice if your belly kind of expands. That's what we want, is for the belly to expand. That indicates you're in a safety state. So yeah, notice where your breathing goes right now. Just kind of be curious about it and see where it goes. I know when I work in therapy, my clients that are in more of a flight fight kind of energy, who are really tense or like worked up, they're leaning forward, they're speaking quicker. When I ask them to breathe deeply into their belly, like it's difficult. It is not easy. They tense up, they grab a chair and they go, it is not easy. But it's important to recognize that and just kind of notice and be more mindful of what it feels like to do so. So safety actually might be uncomfortable. I think I mentioned this earlier, but let's go a little bit deeper into this. Safety might be uncomfortable. Accessing those ventral vagal safety pathways, I think, are generally possible for anybody. In my opinion, we do have those pathways. They are there. Maybe they're not as developed. Maybe they're not as strong in some of us, but they're there. And from my work in therapy, what it seems like is that the capacity to activate these pathways to feel more safety is generally there. I don't think I've met with someone where I felt like that was not possible. And on a biological level, I'm not like doing scans, I can't tell, but on a behavioral level, on a thought level, on a ability to connect with people, all those those top level things are there. Now, can I, do a scan and see what the pathways are being active? Like, no, I can't. Generally possible, but it might not be easy to do. Absolutely, 100%. And when these pathways are active, when we are in our safety state, it is really easy to miss. And it could be fleeting. It could kind of be in and out. Maybe like right now, think about who do you appreciate from your past that back then you didn't. So think back. Is there anyone in your life, maybe a teacher, a coach, family member, someone that back then you didn't appreciate, but now you actually have a lot of appreciation for them? It could be a family member, it could be a teacher, it could be a coach, a pastor, family, friend, whatever it is. And this comes up in therapy a lot, where we think back to our past and we say, you know what, I did feel safe around that person. I didn't recognize it then, I didn't appreciate it, but it was there. It was there. Because we're not mindful enough of what it feels like to be in safety, especially when we exist in more of a dysregulated defensive state. So it's really easy to miss. There's no judgment here. It is what it is. But when we look back, we might say, oh, there was that person, there was that time, that environment where I did truly feel safe or trust or vulnerability. I just missed it when it was there. And part of that might be because it's uncomfortable. I would encourage you as a daily practice to look out for these moments of safety, these moments of connection. To notice when you might have more capacity to smile or to connect with people, because it is there generally. These impulses that we feel to connect with people actually can be difficult. You might notice there's a shift. You might notice that within you, oh, there is this impulse, but it's still difficult to like follow that impulse and actually go connect with somebody or actually show somebody your smile or to hug or whatever it is. There might be an impulse to connect, but then it's just difficult to go through with it because safety can be vulnerable. It can be, you can feel not vulnerable, but exposed. I think vulnerable is when we're safe, we can open up and be vulnerable people. That's different than feeling more defensive and just feeling like you're exposed, like you're open to danger, you're open to threat. So there might be an impulse for these things to happen, but it's too uncomfortable. It's not vulnerability, and now it's felt as exposure. So when this happens, when we do have these impulses to connect or to smile, to feel vulnerability, to feel trust, that in and of itself, having those experiences can be so different and so new and so uncomfortable and so exposed that it sends us right back down our polyvagal ladder, back into a defensive state like flight, fight, shutdown, or even freeze potentially. And again, if you have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to the polyvagal theory, listen to my podcast, Stuck Not Broken, episodes 101 through 109, or go to justinlmft.com. I have the Polyvagal 101 course. So as you're doing, whatever practice you have in place, I hope you do have something that you're doing to actively stimulate your safety pathways or to feel more in the present moment, to feel more grounded. And that's what building safety anchors is all about. Hopefully you can notice these as they do arise. Those pathways may activate enough for you to soften those more defensive feelings. So when you feel that impulse to connect with somebody else, or you feel that impulse to breathe deeply and just look inward, that can be uncomfortable, that can be scary. But the more you have your safety pathways active, those defensive kind of reactions to safety, if that makes sense, that'll soften, and your capacity to engage in those connections might increase. And it's really important that you mindfully notice as these things come up, be with them, feel them, and allow it to be there, and then hopefully act on that impulse. Even if you do feel a little bit of safety, even if you're alone, like let's say you're alone doing some meditation or yoga or playing with your kids, whatever it is, and you feel that safety and you notice it, just like be with it, and then make that conscious decision to smile. Even though it might feel weird, make that decision to like, I notice it, I feel it, let me act on this and just do a small thing and just smile. Or if you can, like connect with somebody, connect with your pet, that'd be fine too. Is your safety anchors course based on Deb Dana's books? It's based on the polyvagal theory, and I think Deb Dana and I have our own ways of applying it that probably have a lot of overlap. So no, I wouldn't say it's based on her books exactly. I think I've only read one of them, The Polyvagal Theory and Therapy. The other two I started and I haven't finished. It's actually I would say a lot different, because what she brings to the table is she brings a lot of exercises and techniques, and it's like bam, 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 bam. And she does invite you to figure out what works for you. And I kind of take the opposite approach, which is I have no idea what works for you. I do have some ideas, but the course is more about the concept of safety. Here's some potential pathways to safety, like music, your senses, memories. That's the last one because I think it's the most difficult. The environment. So there's 6 different paths that I lay out. I teach you about them, and then I, on a daily practice, guide you through how do you figure out what works for you, and then how to like build on those. That's so it's different. They're both Deb Day and I both base our stuff on the polyvagal theory, and like once you get that, activating the safety pathways, discharging stuck defensive energy, it kind of has there's going to be a lot of overlap. So it's not exactly based on her work. It's based on polyvagal theory and my interpretation of it, and then my what I've learned from applying it in therapy and whatnot. Hi, Justin. Can you talk about vengeance? Oh wow. Basically, as we feel more safety, it's kind of paradoxical. As we feel safety, as we activate those safety pathways. So it's like if we were to give it some agency, that tells your system we're safe. Now we can actually deal with our stuff. If we're safe, now we can deal with and discharge this stuck defensive energy. So it's not like we feel safe and then everything else just goes away. It's like we activate those safety pathways, and then along with it comes the stuck defensive stuff. And so that may surface as hatred. It may surface as vengeance, like the person said, maybe. It may surface as aggression. It could be something as small as irritability, which is like a small level of anger, I would say. But it might be panic. It might be anxiety. All these things can come along with it as we activate our safety pathways. That totally could happen. So that's kind of to answer the question about why is this stuff coming up, and I feel this impulse to act on it in a vengeful kind of way. That generally that could be kind of what's happening there, is that as we have a stronger vagal break, other stuff comes along with it. We just have to kind of be ready for it. And so with building safety anchors, that's kind of why I don't go into the defensive stuff. We have to keep building the strength of the vagal break first, and then mindfully, purposefully go to the more stuck defensive stuff. We can't, in my opinion, we should not be doing that until our system is ready for it. And then once we have enough of an anchor in our safety pathways, then when we go to the more defensive stuck stuff, it won't surface as this dysregulated, out of control defensive state or energy or behavior. So when we feel more safety and we come out of our shutdown state, as we're anchored more in safety and we come out of our shutdown state, along with that will come anger or irritability. Typically, that's very common. But the more anchored we are in our safety state, as that energy, that fight energy comes up within us, it won't be felt as anger or hatred or vengeance or whatever it is. It'll be felt as power. And power and anger are a lot different. So that hopefully that answers that question of like this stuff's coming up within me. And generally those are my thoughts. Now, how do we discharge stuck defensive stuff? The quick answer would be to mindfully be with it and listen to the impulse that it has. When we have the safety impulse, we have the impulse to go connect with others. When we have anxiety, when we have stuck fight energy, we probably have an impulse to run or to be aggressive. I'm not saying run away. I'm not saying be aggressive with people. But there are simple things you can do to mindfully be with your stuck defensive energy that utilize it in more of a productive kind of way. I can't go too deep into that, but that's the general idea. Whether or not I would highly recommend that people first focus on those safety pathways. That first focus on your ability to feel safe, to feel grounded, to stay in the present moment. That is way more important, in my opinion, than going after that stuck defensive stuff and attempting to discharge it. Because if you go at that and you're not ready for it, it's just re-traumatizing. It's just going to reinforce the state that you're in, that you're stuck in. So I think this is in response to what I said about vengeance, and as we feel more safety, that defensive stuff coming up. The person says, that makes sense. I have been feeling stuck in the anger. We'll work on the safety anchors more as I can control this sense of anger/vengeance. Wow, that power aspect is something I never thought of. Yeah, it's when we have the safety state active, then when we feel those defensive states, those energies, those stuck defensive energies, it becomes something different. When the safety state's active and we feel anger, it becomes power. When the safety state's active when the safety state is active and we feel anxiety and then successfully use it, it's felt more as not avoidance, but escape. I would say that. And the idea is, like, avoidance is like we're avoiding the problem. Escape is we see the problem and then successfully navigate it and escape it. I would say that's a different experience than avoidance altogether. And then with shutdown, when you have the safety state active, instead of isolating, it'll probably be felt more as solitude. So it becomes something different, and that's why it's so important to have that safety state active, to be grounded in the present moment. So the present moment, one of the benefits of being anchored in your safety state, ventral vagal system, is that you're going to exist more in the present moment. It's kind of an important thing, right? The funny thing is that we all exist in the present moment. We literally do. You physically, literally are in the present moment, and so am I. We all exist in the present moment together, right? The issue is that consciously we may not feel like we exist in the present moment. Obviously, you may feel like you exist in the past. You may feel like you're existing in the future, or ruminating on the future, or worrying about the future. So what you physically are doing is maybe different than your conscious experience of what you're physically doing. That could be a different thing. So the issue here is to align your physical reality with what you feel. We want you to feel in the present moment along with your body, which already exists in the present moment. We have to get those two things to align, right? So when we're not in the present moment, though, we can gauge our present momentness by looking at our thoughts and our feelings as potential indicators. Not easy, I'm not saying it's easy, but these could be indicators of how much we are in the present moment. If we become too lost in our thoughts, if we become too emotionally distraught, these are indications that we're not in the present moment. It is completely okay to have any and all emotions that you have. It is completely okay to get lost in your thoughts a little bit. But when it gets too much, not that it's wrong, but it's not helpful. And it actually could be reinforcing of your state. Not that you're choosing to do so. No one chooses to become too emotionally distraught or too up in their thoughts. It just kind of happens. It's a story follow state thing for our thoughts. So it's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to say that, but it's not helpful either. So as you notice your thoughts ramping up or your feelings ramping up and escalating, that's a good indication that you're no longer existing in the present moment. And that's before we hopefully want to catch that before it gets too far. Rumination is basically overthinking. That's where you dwell on the same thing over and over again. So that could be a way of indicating that you're no longer in the present moment, is noticing like, oh, I'm thinking about the same thing over and over and over again, day after day, even maybe. When you're dwelling on something, that's a good indicator that your safety pathways are not active, and therefore you are not in the present moment. When we ruminate, we tend to like hyper focus on what people said, what people did or didn't do. That's a good indication that you're not in the present moment. When we ruminate, we tend to become disconnected from our sensory experiences. So what our five senses are telling us, but also our somatic felt sense. We lose connection with that. That's a good way of indicating that you're not in the present moment. If you're stuck in your thoughts, there's probably a good indication that you have too much defensive energy in your system. So all of that is going to compromise our capacity to be in the present moment. Likewise, emotional turmoil. So when we get too wrapped up in anxiety, stress, pressure, anger, and more, and again, these feelings aren't bad, but they can absolutely be overpowering, I guess is kind of what I'm trying to say. When we get too wrapped up in these really intense emotions, that's a really good indicator that we are not existing in the present moment, that we've lost access to our sensory experiences, more or less, right? We've lost access to our ability to connect with people. So these are good indicators. And when you're too worked up, it is kind of hard to notice them, but the hope is that we catch these before it becomes too much. So I would really encourage you to be aware, not judgmental or evaluative. And again, not easy to do, I know. But as best you can, be aware of these things. And if they happen, they happen. All right? It's not helpful to judge them. It's not helpful to evaluate them. It's not helpful to shame yourself or them or whatever it is. If you can, notice your thoughts, use them as indicators. of what state you're in or how much access you have to the present moment, which is an indicator of how much access you have to your safety pathways. The trick here, or the goal here, is not to change these thoughts and these feelings. That might sound ridiculous, but the goal is not to change them. It's actually to allow them to be there. And I know it sounds ridiculous, right? But I don't know if you've noticed, but when we have these more defensive kind of feelings and we try to make them go away, it doesn't really work out all that well. When we try to make them go away, when we minimize or excuse or rationalize them, it doesn't help. Maybe it helps for that present moment or for that instant, but those sensations, those feelings just kind of get worse in the long run, right? They just stay, tightly packed maybe in our system or however you feel it. And they don't go away. So the idea is not to make it go away. The idea is actually to be with it. And that only happens when we have our safety pathways active. Once we are grounded in a safety state, once we're grounded in the present moment, then when we feel those things like anxiety or aggression or numbness, then we'll be able to be with it, tolerate it, be more curious about it. Not make it go away, but actually kind of invite it to be there in a way. And so the idea would be like when you see yourself more anxious to say, I see you, anxiety, I see you there. Say hello to it. I see you there and you're welcome to stay with me. I'll be curious about you. I'm not going to get wrapped up in you. I'm not going to start, thinking too much into whatever it is. So I see you, I feel you, but I'm also right now going to do something that helps me to feel safe. That's the idea. So I see anger, aggression, irritability, numbness. I see you, I feel you, and you're welcome to hang out with me. But I'm also going to go do something that activates my safety state. Something that activates my capacity to be more grounded in the present moment. So I can't tell you what that is. I have no idea what that is for you. My course, Building Safety Anchors, that's kind of the idea of it, is that I don't know the right answer for anybody, but I know that it's extremely important to feel safe, to be grounded in the present moment, to have those safety pathways active, to build the strength of our vagal brake. So I know that. I just don't know how to do that for you. That's kind of something you have to be curious about, is like, what feels safe for me? What do I feel those pulls towards and those pushes away from? Okay, that's the idea. I think it's extremely important to focus on safety first and not delve into the other stuff, the defensive stuff, quite yet. Okay, someone says, so true, and then use this sentence. I think this is a response to me saying, to invite the feelings to be there. I think that's what this is about. So true, and then use this sentence. I think it's then use this sentence. Even though I feel anxiety, maybe, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. That could be helpful. That could be helpful if you believe it. That sentence, though, I love and accept myself, could easily be that cognition could easily be a trigger to someone. Be like, I don't. But I think the idea is to invite that feeling to be there, and then maybe have a sentence that you do believe in. Like maybe the sentence is, anxiety, I see you, but I know things will get better. Like maybe that's something that you could believe in. But saying I love and accept myself, or I feel gratitude for this moment, or whatever it is, I think the sentence that we put, the cognition that we put in there is actually pretty important. Oh, I like that. They said, better to use and instead of but. Anxiety, I see you, and I know it'll get better. I like that a lot. I like that. I really like playing with words and differentiating between words. So that's like I love that so much. Yeah, that's but indicates that things are awful, right? And indicates I have control, or and indicates I got this. I see you, and this is also true at the same time. I love that. Thank you for that differentiation. I love that. By the way, this is a little bonus right here, and I'll probably use this in the podcast maybe. But why do therapists charge you for missed sessions? And the answer is because we wake up early. This happened today. I'm not upset at all, but I woke up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday. I do weekend sessions. Got dressed. Got my favorite polka dot shirt on. Got a sweatshirt on. Got dressed. Drove out 20 minutes to the office. Got set up. and the person didn't show up. Easy, just a misunderstanding on their part, but that I spent time getting up early on a Saturday, left my family on a Saturday, which I don't like doing, but I do work on Saturdays, and spent money on gas, like all this stuff. So why do we charge for missed sessions? This is why. It's not just, you're not just paying for the therapeutic interventions, you're also paying for our time. So yeah. Once you have worked on safety for years and an old resentment and anger comes up, what might help you release it besides staying with it? When I work with people who have it's not just feelings, it's not just the feeling. There's a autonomic shift happening within you. When stuff comes up, let's say you feel these old feelings. Okay, let's just keep it simple and say anxiety, right? It's not just the feeling. There's also an autonomic shift that's happening, and this is very polyvagal stuff. So when these things come up, it's not just the feeling. There's also this autonomic shift. Your body is preparing to do something. Okay. Even things like right now, I'm safe. I'm in a safety state for the most part, but there is a noticeable level of flight anxiety for me as well that I can feel. So my body shifts along with that, and it repurposes things. Like right now, my saliva, this is hopefully not too gross, but my saliva production is less. It sounds weird, right? But my mouth is going dry more often than if I wasn't doing this. Because when you're in more of a flight state, you don't really have to chew and eat things, and digestion kind of like the whole process of it. Actually, I think digestion amps up, but saliva stimulation and whatnot, I think it goes down. But basically, your body prepares to evade or avoid or get out of a situation. So if I were to really listen to what I want, let's say I stopped doing this right now and just did a quick meditation, took a deep breath, looked inward, I may have the impulse, that energy within me to go do something, probably utilizing my legs. And so I could do, if it was bad enough, I could do a walk around the block mindfully out in the sun, ground myself, and use that energy, right? I could go, it's too cold right now, but I could go swimming back and forth, use my legs, use the power of my legs to utilize that energy. So it's like these autonomic shifts have physical components that come along with them. Our muscle tension changes, everything shifts. So as this stuff comes up, what does your body want to do? Now be careful here, because if you're in more of like this aggressive fight state, you may want to go choke somebody. Don't do that. I'm not saying that. Okay? Do not do that. Don't hurt anybody. Don't hurt yourself. That's not what I'm saying. But let's say you are in this aggressive state and you feel this. This is very common for my clients that have this anger or rage or whatever it is that come up within them. They want to hurt somebody or hurt themselves maybe. And they might have an impulse to squeeze. Okay, or push. So how do you get the energy out? Well, you listen to what your body wants and then use that energy in a healthy way, not hurting yourself, not hurting other people, okay? But if you have this impulse to squeeze, grab something around you and squeeze. It could be a fidget, but it also could be like I have a hoodie over there. I can grab that hoodie and twist it and squeeze it. And mindfully listen to, feel, experience what that feels like in my muscles, right? To feel that come out or to be used, to feel my muscles tense and then relax. So that could be a way to utilize that energy to help it come out, ground yourself more in the present moment. But don't do that, I would say, unless you can handle it and mindfully do so. Because if you try to feel that and use that tension, that aggression, and you're not ready for it, that could lead to all sorts of horrible things. So that's not what I'm saying. Don't do that, okay? Anchor yourself in safety enough to be able to mindfully listen to what your body needs and then do it. But not hurting, I have to keep saying this, not hurting yourself or other people. If you feel a lot of anxiety, you may have the impulse to just take a quick walk. And so it's like you can use that energy within you in a pro-social way or a productive way, I will say that. So hopefully that answers that question. Yeah, so how do you release it? Now, I want to add one more thing to this. It says that years and years, old resentment and anger come up. The resentment is, I guess there's an experience of that as well, but feelings, as we anchor more in safety, other things may come up, including sensations, emotions, but also thoughts. So resentment in particular, grudges, blame, all these things, these are thoughts that we have. We have a feeling of maybe anger or aggression, irritability, and then a thought of this person, how dare they, or whatever. And that might be true. That might be well deserved. I'm not saying that. So when these things come up, the thoughts are absolutely important, and we can work with that in therapy. But the sensations and the feelings are, I would say, are in a way more important. They're more directly to the stuck autonomic state. So thoughts follow our state. Story follows state. That's a Deb concept. Story follows state. So if we just stay with the thoughts of vengeance, or the thoughts of blame, the thoughts of whatever, if we just stay there, that could be helpful, but it also could just be spinning our wheels. The closer we can get to the stuck defensive state is probably going to be more productive if the person can handle it. Any tips on going from fight to flight? Good job, by the way. This is so difficult for me. I'm really glad that you recognize it. So with flight, fight, those are both sympathetic, but I'm really glad that you know it's flight and then fight as far as responses to danger. So on the polyvagal ladder, coming up the ladder from shutdown into flight, fight, it's actually shutdown to fight and then flight. And if you're in more of an aggressive, stuck, angry state, just day in, day out, you deal with that and then go up into flight. So it's this, you'll feel it as aggression, anger, irritability, right? Those are the general feelings of fight that are stuck. Up the ladder into flight, which you'll experience as anxiety, avoidance, not really panic. That's a more of a freeze kind of thing. And then once you deal with that, then you can go up in your safety state. So how to deal with from fight to flight? What I have found helpful is when I work with clients is we have to actually feel it. And it's not, especially if you're going from shutdown into fight, that's really hard, because from emptiness and numbness, all of a sudden to having energy, fight, aggressive energy, is very difficult to do. It's possible, but it's a slower process. If you're stuck in fight, it's kind of like, well, you have to mindfully experience the fight state, right? You have to mindfully experience what's happening within you. And in therapy, somebody might be like leaning forward. They might be talking faster, kind of like I'm doing right now. They might have more muscle tension. They might be breathing in their shoulders. So it's just kind of like noticing what's happening right now. What is happening within you? And can we be with it and feel it enough to let it do what it needs to do? And of course, we have to have the safety state active before we do that. So if you can do that, then people can be more curious about what's happening within them. And then like just bringing that level of mindfulness to what's happening within you can help it to soften, but it also can help some shifts start to happen. So if you feel something stuck within you, you might feel some shifts happening, some softening happening. And I've had people say they feel like tension here, and they feel it start to like spread out as they softens. They may feel this like constricted, tense kind of feeling. And then as they work with it, notice it, feel it, and just describe it, then it softens and kind of spreads out. So that's, it's just one example. So going from fight to flight, you kind of have to, I think, feel the stuck defensive fight energy without judgment, without trying to make it go away, just feeling it as it is. And then you'll notice it as it shifts into probably more of anxious kind of flight. And it might sometimes it's brief, sometimes it takes longer. I can't tell anyone in particular what that's going to look like, feel like, how long it's going to take. I have no idea. But likely what's going to happen is we'll go from fight up into flight, and there will be a sense of anxiousness, of rushed, of needing to get out of the situation or the place or whatever it is. Commonly with the students I work with, as they come out of fight, then up into flight, they want to leave school. Like they just want to leave. And so it's important to recognize, like, let's not, don't do that. Let's not leave school, but let's notice that feeling, that impulse to get away from something. Let's notice that anxiety that you have inside of you. And then it's like the same process. So as things shift from fight into flight, we notice the same impulse. It might be something like their leg starts tapping or shaking, There might be an impulse to to run, to move, to do something. And so it's like we don't want to do that exactly unless you have a therapy practice where you have the space and capacity to do that. But we want to just notice the feeling of it, the sensation of that impulse to escape, and kind of like feel it on a muscular level, on a felt sense level, and then notice those shifts that start to happen. Now, if you do it once, that doesn't mean that it's ever going to happen again, that you won't, drop down the ladder into those states. You kind of have to keep doing it over and over again, I think. I don't think it's a one-time thing. I haven't seen that. I haven't experienced that personally. I haven't seen that with my clients, that it's like they do this like discharge and that's it. They're good. Like, it's this, you have to practice it, continue to do it. And each time it gets a bit easier. Each time accessing the safety state is easier and easier. At least ideally, that's kind of the way it works, or at least what I'm seeing. I guess ideally it would be a one-time thing, and then that would be it. I just haven't seen that really happen. Bye.